Our first reading today is from the book of Revelation, portions of chapter 12. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter, and her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down." When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time and times and half a time, out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away in the torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war with the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus. And from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, verses 31 through 40. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. And then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." May God bless the hearing and the living of this word. And further from the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg, from Apocalypse Revealed, number 533. A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet. This symbolizes the Lord's new church in heaven, which is the new heaven, and the new church to come on earth, which is the new Jerusalem. The woman here appeared clothed with the sun, because the church is governed by love towards the Lord, for it acknowledges him and keeps his commandments, and that is loving him. And the sun symbolizes love. And from the Doctrine of Faith, number 55. The dragon mentioned in the book of Revelation symbolizes people devoted to a faith divorced from caring. I noted earlier that in the course of time, every church degenerates into two common evil versions of religion. One that comes from a love of having control, and one that comes from intellectual pride. So, my friends, we've spent a few weeks now with one important metaphor from the book of Revelation, the holy city, New Jerusalem. And today we are going to feature another image that is central to the Swedenborgian tradition, the woman clothed with the sun and the great red dragon. So in the Swedenborgian worldview, the woman clothed with the sun symbolizes what Swedenborg calls a new church. And this is not a church understood in an institutional way, but in a more mystical way. It is the ongoing connection between humankind and the divine. And the woman in the story represents this connection in all its beauty and power, in its fierceness and its serenity. And when it's called new, it speaks to the tender hope that we all have, that humanity's connection to the divine might always be growing and evolving, a hope that God might always be tending to this connection and providing opportunities for it, and that we might be open to seeing those opportunities and acting upon them. Importantly, the woman clothed with the sun is pregnant, again representing the possibility of newness and generativity within humanity's connection with God. And the church, understood in this mystical way, at its best, and represented in traditions throughout the world, can be a powerful force for new learning and insight, for seeing new perspectives, for helping us create and sustain new habits, for birthing a growing and thriving life of care for others. And in particular, we understand the child that the woman will bear to represent the doctrine of this new church, meaning all the valuable ideas and approaches and perspectives that provide a framework for living a useful, caring, reflective, spiritual life. And in our tradition, there is one central idea that is integral to living a useful, caring life, and that is that love is the engine of faith. That faith cannot be separated from love and caring. That true ideas are only true insofar as they express love. And the only true expression of faith is to live a life based in kindness. And what could be a more perfect representation of this than a baby? Innocent, vulnerable, angelic, completely dependent on care from another, and actually grown cell by cell by the care one body gives to another. But the idea that love is the engine of faith is not always welcome to us. It might sound simple in principle, but the practice of it requires the displacement of the self, of the displacement of ego and superiority over others. Many times, we don't want to do that. So we try to separate these two things, love and faith. We humans might tell ourselves that we don't really need the love part. We can have a spiritual life or something that looks like it just with the faith part, if we are certain enough about it. That we don't really have to let go of self or ego or superiority. We can get to keep those things alongside certainty and faith. And this is not a good path. It is trying to have our cake and eat it too, trying to have a spiritual life without any of the personal sacrifice of power or the centrality of ego. This is represented by the red dragon. This is a creature that devours and destroys. It is the delusion that it is possible and allowable or even preferable that we can disregard love because we believe the right things and we believe them devotedly enough. And we can see the face of this dragon in recent attempts by some sectors of conservative Christianity to label empathy as a sin. The argument is that empathy is weaponized by certain progressive groups and used to bully people into feeling guilty about being cruel to people that they don't think deserve empathy, the wrong people. And this idea that empathy is a tool of manipulation has now also crossed over into some secular spaces and conversations, becoming the de facto stance of our current administration. And we can see very clearly that this is the red dragon snorting fire and smoke, being angry about the ego and power relinquishment that empathy demands, and not wanting to do it. Being angry about how empathy necessarily diminishes their perceived superiority and centrality, saying, I don't have to do it and you can't make me, and then pretending that their faith does not require it. Jettisoning the integral practice of empathy that Jesus modeled, and letting their shell of an imposter faith strike out alone. Which would be bad enough, except that the dragon then turns around and tries to devour the baby, tries to destroy any truth or practice or institution that upholds empathy as central, by spewing forth a river of lies and falsehoods and spurious arguments. Our job is to protect that baby, birthed every day by the new consciousness of our connectedness with the represented by the woman clothed with the sun. Our job is to be the good earth that swallows the river of lies through consistent and resilient loving action. Because this is where everything always must culminate, acting with love to benefit our neighbor, our fellow human beings. This is where a life of faith is always supposed to lead, every single time. You see, in the Swedenborgian tradition, we make a big deal of the relationship of love and wisdom in God and in each of us. We see these two things as embodying a partnership, an indistinguishable oneness, much like the yin and yang from Eastern philosophy. They support each other, with love driving wisdom and wisdom guiding love. But we too are susceptible to the dragon's arguments. We too can argue that wisdom must be the gatekeeper, that love should lie dormant until wisdom figures out how it is allowed to be expressed, turned on and off at wisdom's say-so. And this too is a delusion. Our discernment is not supposed to be employed first as a way to determine who deserves empathy and who doesn't. Our discernment is not supposed to be a gatekeeper to empathy. It is supposed to be its guide, helping us to determine how to love in health and effectiveness. And figuring out that measure of healthiness and effectiveness is not always easy. It's actually a ton of work. And so it's tempting to just say empathy is too hard or too costly, or to just give it lip service. But Stephen Charleston, an Episcopal priest and Indigenous elder, has said, "Love compromised is faith denied." And never has a Swedenborgian sentiment been better expressed. Judgment is not supposed to be the center of doctrine, faith, or life. Love is. Love is the engine. It is the heart of faith. Judgment guides, but it must not take the throne. Empathy is and must always be the default, because it is God's default. If we are even remotely trying to pretend that we care about what God wants or the kind of life that Jesus lived, as exemplified in our Matthew reading, we cannot wriggle out of the demand to practice, cultivate, and act with empathy. The book of Revelation was originally written as a work of resistance literature against the cruelty of empire. It spoke to its own context then, and we can use its symbolism to help us recognize the shape of empire around us and within us now. It can give us hope that notions like the dragon will not prevail. It can give us hope that the woman clothed with the sun really is the future of humankind. It can give us hope that even the small things we do to safeguard the woman's baby are valuable and important. So, how does this story end? The dragon tries to drown the woman in a great flood of falsehood, but she is taken away and saved by the wings of an eagle. Swedenborg tells us that the wings of an eagle represent spiritual intelligence and circumspection. And to me, this means being kind and reflective, seeing through to the heart of things with clarity, knowing how to recognize false reasoning, knowing how to recognize when selfish tendencies rise up within us, and having the spiritual intelligence and maturity to take a beat and always recenter in the reality of what the woman clothed with the sun is working to birth. It is spiritually intelligent to love, to learn how to learn about what is preventing us from loving, and to learn what love looks like to others. Empathy is no sin. On the contrary, it is the highest good there is. It is the only thing that prevents each of us from pretending we are a universe of one. And such pretending is the opposite of God's hope and intention. God made us and the universe to be in eternal community. And so, my friends, let us be loyal to that intention and to that reality. Amen.